Hi everyone. Now, I think everyone knows of the health benefits of honey and that beeswax can be used for a variety of different things. However, honeybees also use another substance that beekeepers know as a sticky irritant that glues hive parts together and stains bee suits and gloves and can't be cleaned off, and it's called propolis. Now, however irritating propolis can be, like honey, it does have a wide range of health benefits. Propolis is essentially tree resins that bees collect. The resins are produced by trees when they've been damaged or are under viral attack, and are produced to protect the tree and its flowers. The trees the bees normally take the resin from include poplar, ash, birch, alder and horse chestnut. And I'm sure we all know of the sticky buds on horse chestnut trees, and these buds are covered in tree resin to protect them against disease. Now, unlike nectar that is used to make honey, bees don't change the chemical composition of the resins, although they do add some saliva and beeswax. The bees collect the resin from the trees using their mandibles and then scrape it back onto their back legs in much the same way as they do when they're collecting pollen. Then, once the bees have returned to the colony, it stops being resin and becomes propolis. Now, back at the colony, the resin is so sticky, other bees have to help the bee to remove it. And in the wild, bees often have their colonies in hollowed out trees or other cavities, and they cover the walls with the propolis. The walls inside the tree are rough and rutted, so it's fairly easy for the bees to cement the propolis into the cracks. At the entrance to the colony, the propolis is often very thick, between 1/4 and 1/2 inch thick. And this creates what is known as the propolis envelope, and you might be able to see on the picture that there's mould above and below the envelope, which has been prevented from getting into the colony by the propolis. However, in the beehives we make them live in, the walls are usually very smooth, and it's difficult for the bees to attach the propolis to the side of the hives. The walls can be roughened with a wire brush, and some beekeepers paint a solution of the propolis onto the hive walls. And next year I'm going to try pinning some rough sandpaper to the walls of the hives to help the bees deposit the propolis. For the bees, the main use of propolis is to maintain a healthy hive and to keep the bees healthy. It has powerful antioxidant and antimicrobial properties, making it naturally antibacterial, antifungal and antiviral. It's been shown to help with chalk brood and foul brood, and this is a picture of a small hive beetle that's been mummified with propolis to protect the hive. And this picture is a picture of a mouse that has somehow got into the hive, and either it's died or the bees have killed it, but it's so big that the bees can't get it out. So if it was left there, it would decompose and spread disease around the hive. And so what the bees have done is they've mummified it, and they've encased it in a shell of propolis, and the mouse will rot inside that shell without causing any damage to the hive. Now, all of this reduces the stress on the bees' immune system, which makes them healthier. It also helps the bees keep the hive temperature steady at about 35 degrees, and they do this by filling in small cracks with the propolis. Anything wider than say 7 mil, they fill it up with wax comb. So it's good for trees and it's good for bees. Is it any good for us? Well, the antimicrobial benefits have been known about since biblical times, and the word propolis is a Greek word with two parts, pro, polis, which means before the city, which indicates it's used as a defence for the community of the bees. Hippocrates of oath fame, he also used it. It was used by the Egyptians in their embalming fluids, and the Roman soldiers used it as a tonic and also as a wound dressing. Propolis lost popularity in medieval times, but it was resurrected during the Renaissance period as people became more interested in natural remedies. In the First and Second World Wars, it was used as an antiseptic by Russian troops and became known as the Russian penicillin. Modern research into propolis has confirmed what our ancestors knew, that basically it's good for us and has a wide range of benefits. It can be used as a tonic, and these days we are encouraged to meet this 5-a-day thing by eating fresh fruit and fresh vegetables, and propolis as a liquid has masses of bioflavonoids in it, which is why it's been taken as a tonic. It also has the ability to accelerate the benefit of other substances like vitamin C. So when you take vitamin C, its benefits are accelerated by propolis. Propolis has been shown to be very good for skin ailments such as eczema, psoriasis, gum sores, dry skin. And before I knew all of this, I was asked at a market whether I made propolis tincture. Now at that time, propolis was this brown, sticky, gooey stuff that was a pain. And I had no idea what she was talking about. So I Googled it and found out all of these amazing things that it's capable of doing. And I was asked again a few times about whether I had any propolis. And it turns out it's very widely used in Europe, particularly Eastern Europe, although hardly at all in the UK. So I decided to make some. Now, first thing is, how do you get it? Now, the simple way of doing it is to put a plastic mesh on the top of the brood frames, and the bees propolise it, and then after a period of time you take the mesh away, you put it in a freezer, and it becomes very brittle, so you can then mush it up with your hands and get the propolis out of it. The other way, which is what I do, is basically I just scrape it off the hives. I take a small amount off the hives that produce it. Some hives produce a lot, some produce very little, and build it up, particularly in the early part of the year when it's quite warm. In the later part of the year when it's getting cooler and colder, I leave them to it and don't force them to having to make any more. So the first thing I discovered was that to make a tincture, you had to make it with very strong alcohol. Alcohol that was in fact too strong to buy from a chemist, although I did try. So I finished up buying it quite legally through eBay from Germany. And at a market I met somebody who again was from Eastern Europe, and they asked why didn't I use spiritus. Now this is something I've never heard of, and it turns out to be Polish vodka, but not just any old Polish vodka, 95% proof. So what you do, or what I do, is once I've got the propolis, it becomes quite brittle and hard once it's away from the hive and has cooled down. So I put it in a freezer, leave it there for a few days till it gets really hard, and then basically smash it up with a hammer to try and get it down to a dust. And then once I've done this, I add the spiritus to it and leave it to sort of soak in, and I leave it for a couple of weeks, and at the end of it I strain it through a coffee filter to make the propolis tincture. Now, although the tonic is fine for being used as a drink, as a tonic, if you're trying to apply it to skin, it's a bit clumsy. So I eventually decided perhaps I would make a cream. However, making something that you have to apply to the skin makes it a cosmetic, and at which point people appear with different size hoops to jump through and also demanding money. But eventually I decided to go ahead with it. I submitted the recipe and a sample to a government laboratory to test it to make sure it was safe. And after some slightly eccentric emails to and from this laboratory, I got it tested and approved, which means now I can legitimately sell this at markets excuse me, or other events. And I've been selling it now for 2 or 3 years. And initially I was perhaps a little cautious of pushing it, as I've got no medical experience. But as time went on, more and more people were using it and were coming back saying they'd benefited from it. And the thing I think made it for me was that I met somebody at a market who had just broken her leg. She was in a wheelchair but was using crutches. And these crutches are the sort that they grip you here, and apparently these things were making her arms very sore and red. So I gave some of the cream to her for her to try, and she came back in a couple of months rather, and said that she had put it on one arm and not the other, and the arm she put it on had cleared up completely. Now for me the important thing was that Martine was a qualified NHS nurse, so I thought, well, that's good enough for me. So that was the trigger, if you like, for me to sort of start selling it. Now, since I've been selling it, I've had any number of people coming back and say it's benefited from them. Kathleen, who lives in Luton, she was having chemotherapy, and the only thing that stopped her skin from peeling and going very dry was Propolis. A friend of mine, Karen, her son had admittedly not a terrible blotch on his face. She didn't want to use steroids. She used the cream on him, and a couple of days after he started using it, she sent me this photograph. Now, admittedly, it isn't perhaps entirely visible and not the worst thing in the world, but when you're 14, anything looks horrific. And also sort of slightly comic things in some ways is that at a market I was talking to somebody about the Propolis, and they asked me completely straight-faced, did I think it was any good for chickens? And it turned out that her chickens had something called scaly leg. Now I keep chickens and I know it's really nasty. They get sort of bacteria in the scales of their legs, and their legs become very red and very inflamed, and it's very uncomfortable for them. She came back a month or so later, it had cleared it up completely. So there is an increasing awareness and interest in Propolis, and certainly if you go into Holland and Barrett, you'll see that the shelves of Manuka are beginning to clear a little bit to be replaced by a Propolis, and you can buy it as a tonic, a liquid or a cream, or even capsules for sore throats. So that's Propolis. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in a bit.